Okay, today is September 20th, 2020, and I'd like to ask a few questions of you today, Mom, if that's okay?
That's fine, John.
Great, perfect. The first question I have for you, I kind of want to talk a little bit about your life from birth, growing up through elementary through junior high school. So that's today's questions.
Okay.
So, question number one for you. Tell me a little bit about your full name and why you were named that, and did you have a nickname growing up?
My name is Esther Ann. I was named after my grandmother, my mother's mother, and my middle name was after my mother's very best friend, and which was the Ann. When I was growing up, usually I was called Esther Ann, both names. And that was from my brothers and my mother and father and my cousins. Everyone called me Esther Ann. As I got a little bit older, I got some of Gussie. They wouldn't call me Gus, but they'd call me Gussie with an IE on it.
Great, great. So now, when and where were you born exactly?
I was born in Fairmont General Hospital in Fairmont, West Virginia. And it was in February 8th, 1943.
Do you know who all was there?
I know my father wasn't there when I was born, and he got a phone call that from my mother that it was a girl. The reason my dad wasn't there, he was working in Wheeling, West Virginia, or just north of Wheeling, and he immediately quit his job when he found out it was a girl and came home. And the reason he quit his job is because the boss told him he couldn't come home. And he said, but I just had a baby girl. And so he quit his job, and here he comes home, and my mother is very upset because now she's got 2 kids and a husband with no job.
That's great. So, what were the full names, and if you know them, the dates and birth and places of both your parents? Do you know that?
My father was born in Fairmont, West Virginia on June 6, 1921. My mother was born, I think she was born in Fairmont, but she may have been born in Winfield or Meadowdale, because I'm not sure. She was born March 26th, 1921 also.
Okay, and your grandparents, do you know the full names of your grandparents?
My mother's parents, her mother was Esther Alice Keener, and then she married a Boyce, and then after he was deceased, he passed when she was about 30 years old and left 4 children. And then she remarried to my grandfather that we called Pap. And his name was Wayman Merrifield. But my mother's biological father was Urban Boyce. They were both from East Side, Fairmont, West Virginia, down around Winfield and Meadowdale. My father's parents were Walter Moses Augustus, and he was born in Ironton, Ohio in 1892. He passed away in 1931 in Fairmont, West Virginia. My grandmother's name was Leila Virginia Price, and when she married Augustus, married Walter Moses, and then she remarried after he passed to a Mr. Ralph Blazier, who is the only grandfather that I knew on that side. She was born in 1897, and she passed away in 1975, I believe.
And I believe that's who we refer to as Mom.
We refer to her as Mom.
Okay. And I remember with her, she always had bright red lipstick and
Yes.
always had her fingernails done.
Always had her fingernails done, and she smoked cigarettes, and long cigarettes, and they were filters, and she had a gold cigarette case that I remember as a child, and I thought it was always kind of odd that she had this cigarette case, because my mother smoked also, but my mother never had a cigarette case. And I thought that was very rich looking or something. Not that it was a good thing to really see, but I just remember that. And yes, she did have her, and she always had her earrings on. Always had her earrings on. And even when she passed away, my Aunt Jeannie said in the casket that she needed earrings on. And so they had to put earrings on her.
That's fantastic. So, what were the occupations? What did your mom and dad do for a living?
My father was in the Marine Corps when I was young, when I was born, and during the World War II. And he enlisted after Pearl Harbor. He was drunk, and he and his best friend enlisted together. And it was Mr. George Smith, who was Barbara Smith's husband. And he and his wife had 3 kids too. And here's my mother with 2 children and expecting a third. And George and my dad got drunk and decided to go and enlist, and that's what they did. When he got out of service, he got a job as a milkman. And he was a thin man and not very big. And when he applied for the job, the boss told him he could have the job if he could do the job. But he said with his build, he might have trouble because he didn't think he was strong enough. And he had to stand up in the milk truck and drive the milk truck. And he had to lift heavy cases of milk bottles that were made out of glass, and deliver them door to door. And, but anyway, my dad proved him wrong and worked there for probably a good 30 years at the Fairmont Food, well, it was Imperial Food Company, ice cream company, and then became Fairmont Foods. He played drums from the time he was about the 1st grade, and continued that clear through the age of 85. He was a jazz drummer. He liked jazz, big band, and I think that was his passion.
Didn't he also spend some time selling cars?
He sold cars in his later life after he left the milk company, and he sold Toyotas, mostly Toyotas, and even when he retired up until he was in his 80s, he even worked in a grocery store as a clerk, making change and everything. People were surprised at his age and how well he could do that, and but he worked all his life. He worked all his life. My mother didn't work outside the home when I was young. She had 3 babies, and she always said she had 2 in diapers all the time. And because we were stair steps. And I don't think she ever had a job until my mom and dad went in with another lady, and they opened up a restaurant. And my mother was the cook.
Do you know when that was?
I was in about the 3rd grade.
Probably early 50s, 51,
Yes,
52.
yes. And Mother mother was a very good cook, and I think that's the first job I ever remember my mother really having as a young girl. And but much later, of course, she became a nurse's aide, and then she got a job at Owens, Illinois, and worked there for many years.
What did you do at Owens?
She worked in packing and decorating, and that's where they put the paint on pop bottles or ketchup bottles or whatever. Back more when they were glass bottles. And then, of course, the packing was putting the bottles in the cardboard boxes, and which was asbestos, and which ended up killing my mother.
Yep. So, speaking of your mom, what do you remember most about her in her early days?
In her early days?
Yeah, while you were in school.
And
as a mom.
As a mom, she was a great mom. You know, she was interested in the kids and my brothers and I. She was a sports person. So she was into basketball. She was into football as far as watching it. Track, softball. She knew the rules of the game, and that continued her entire life. She was good at English, and she helped me, I remember, with English homework. If it had to do with math, we had to go to my dad. Daddy was better at math as far as helping us. She was always there, because she didn't work. She was there, but she was always there for us, for anything. And you could always go talk to Mom. She didn't like to discipline very well, and that was left up to my dad. You know, wait till your dad comes home. But mostly that was for my brothers. That wasn't for me. You know, I blamed things on my brothers so that I didn't get spanking. Yeah.
What about your dad? What do you remember most about him as a kid?
As a kid?
Yeah.
I remember my dad coming home from work. And
From the milk company?
From the milk company. And running to greet him at the door. And he would pick me up in both arms.
I'm guessing he came home in the morning. Right? Because wouldn't you typically...
He would go early in the morning. He would go to work early in the morning, but it was still later when he got home, like in the afternoon anyway, or closer supper time.
Okay, so you said he'd come home and...
He'd come home and I'd run to the door, you know, and he'd pick me up with both arms and hug me. And the big thing my dad had was kissing me. And he'd put his chin up against me. And I know at times I didn't like it because he had a 5 o'clock shadow. And it would beard my tender face. You know. But yet I ran to him every morning or every day to get that hug and that kiss, you know. And I remember he would come home later as I got a little older, but I was still young, from a music gig. And he would come home with maybe 2 or 3 of the other guys in the band, and they had maybe recorded their gig, and so they had to replay it, and it was on the recorder, and it didn't matter if it was 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It didn't matter. They were going to do it, and of course it woke me up. And my mother always told me that every time that music come on, I'd hold on to the railing of the baby bed and just jump up and down to the beat of the music. To the beat of the music. But I still remember him playing that reel, or that wire. It was a wire reel. And they'd say, boy, that sounded good. Boy, didn't we sound good.
So they were both very affectionate towards you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So that's where you get it from.
I hope so.
So you talked a little bit about your brothers. So tell me about your two brothers as little kids, and what are their full names?
Well, my older brother is about 14 months older than me, and his name is Walter Allen. And he was born December 19th, 1941. I have a younger brother, Thomas Gary, who's born July 4th, with a firecracker baby. He always thought the fireworks were for him, for his birthday. And he was born in 1945. Both my brothers and I were very close because we were close in age. And Daddy and Mother both taught us young that we had to share things, toys and games and so forth. And we had to share. And they were very protective of me. When I was about 2, I fell. It was about 2.5, I think. And I fell and hit my head, the corner of my eye, on a sharp coffee table that left a scar on my eye, or on my right side of my eye. And when I fell, it caused my eyes to cross. One eyeball went in and one eyeball went out. And first they started doing patches and things to try and strengthen your eyes, your eye muscles. And it didn't work, and I eventually had to have surgery when I was about 7. But during that period that I remember, from like 4 to 7, my friend, the school kids, the neighborhood kids would tease me because I had real thick glasses on also, and they'd call me 4 Eyes. And my brother, especially Alan, my older brother, he'd say, "Don't tease my sister, don't tease my sister." And then my little brother would come up and he'd say, "What'd you say about my sister?" And he's ready to fight him, my little brother. He was ready to fight all the time. Didn't matter, And but they were very, very close to me when we were little.
What do you remember about your grandparents?
Oh my. My grandmother on my mother's side was a good Christian woman. And she wanted everybody to go to church. She wanted everybody to be good. She wanted everybody to eat well. Be happy, not sad. And her husband, Pap, who was my grandfather, he was just an easygoing, wonderful man who raised 4 children who weren't his, and then had 2 more. He was a wonderful cook. I learned a lot from him. I lived with him for several years when I was a teenager. And he was also very protective of me. Where are you going? You got to be home by dark. Now you be careful. You got enough money. Can you make a phone call? He was always just very worried about me.
Do you remember what they did for careers, or did he have a career?
Pap worked at Owens, Illinois also when he was a younger man. And when he retired from the factory itself, he worked at the Owens like a club room. And he had to get the club room ready and set tables and chairs up for banquets and meetings and that sort of thing. And keep it clean. And they had a pool room underneath the clubhouse that he would take my brothers and I to play pool of an evening sometimes. That was when we were a little older, like in junior high. And he was a hard-working man. He mowed the grass. He cleaned the house. I don't think there was anything he couldn't do.
And so obviously you were closer to that side
Right.
of your family as opposed to the other
Right.
side, your dad's side.
Right.
What kind of relationship did you have with your dad's mom? Obviously, I think his father passed away when he was a young boy.
Yeah.
What about his mom? Did you have much of a relationship?
I didn't really, because she lived in Wheeling. Now, yeah, I loved her, and we would go up there quite often, except in the wintertime. It was hard to go up, but we would try to get up at Thanksgiving. And we would always go to Aunt Jeannie's, which was my dad's sister. And Mama was always there, and she would always tell me when I got older, make sure you got your lipstick on. Make sure you got your lipstick on. Yeah. Anyway, her husband, of course, I didn't know because he passed before my dad. And when she married Ralph, he was the grandfather I knew on that side. He was a jolly guy. He was kind of heavy set. He was also a good cook. A good cook.
So, like, what do you remember them cooking?
I remember chocolate cake. I remember beef roast in particular. Beef roast. And of course, we would always have turkey on Thanksgiving and special Jell-O and different things.
Are there any other family members that you particularly remember? And what makes them stand out in your mind?
On my daddy's side, of course, is my Aunt Jeannie, who I named,
That's his sister.
His sister, and she was 5 years younger than he, and he pretty near raised her. She was real special. She was, I think, a little naive when she was growing up because I think my mother taught her a lot of things. In fact, I know she did. And her husband was Uncle Carl, who I became close with much later. He was always there, and he was always a good guy.
That was Carl Philibom.
Carl Philibom, yes. And of course they had one boy, my cousin Fritz, which is Carl Philibom III. And but because they were so far away, we didn't get to see them very much, And but they were very special. They were very special to me. And the ones on mother's side, because we lived basically in the same town. And in fact, when I was a little girl, my Aunt Marilee lived right behind me. My Aunt Marilee Anderson and Junior lived right behind us. They had 3 boys, Jennings, Punky, and Charles. And we played with them all the time.
Those are your first cousins.
And my first cousin, Punky, was my kissing cousin. We were planning to get married, but my grandmother said we couldn't.
What was Punky's real name? That's a nickname, right?
Yeah, his real name's Otis.
Okay.
Otis. And then they had 4 more children after that. But I was real close to them, Aunt Marilee and Uncle Junior. And they helped me a lot. When my parents were divorced, they helped me a lot. And I had Aunt Arlie and Uncle Junior Hearn, and they lived in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio.
Aunt Arlie's your mom's sister?
Yes, and a younger sister. Well, she's a half-sister, but according to the family, there was no halves or no steps or anything like that. We were all just brothers and sisters,
Gotcha.
And because Pap raised his kids that way. And they had 4 boys. But because they lived in Ohio, we were real close to them because they didn't get in very often either. And I don't know, when I was little, it seemed like my dad was too busy to visit. And he would work, and then of course he had gigs on Saturday night, and people get together on Sunday, and he was too tired, so lots of times it was his mother and the kids. And then there was Aunt Lois and Uncle Earl Sloter, who lived in Fairmont, but then they moved when I was in high school, I think. They had 2 children, and their oldest was Joy, who I was close to, and she was the oldest cousin in the family, the first grandchild for Mom. And then there was Uncle Darrell, who was Mother's brother, and Aunt Dottie, who lived in Fairmont, and they had 2 children, and they moved also probably around junior high age, maybe a little before that, to Pennsylvania. So we lost track, or we just didn't get together with them because we did travel to find people or visit with people, and you get together on a holiday. But Aunt Marilee and Uncle Junior were the ones that were the closest.
So did you travel at all? Did you do any vacations ever as a family? Did you ever go anywhere, go to the beach, do anything, go to a cabin? Or did you pretty much just stay in Fairmont?
When I was young, I would get car sick. And so I didn't like to go places because I get car sick. And so I remember my dad saying they were going to go on vacation. And they didn't know where they were going to go. And I said, I don't want to go. Because he said they were just going to drive until they found a place they wanted to stay and stop. And I said, I don't want to go. Can I stay with Mom and Pap? And of course, I ended up staying with them and Mom and Dad and Gary now, and they ended up in Florida. Daytona Beach, Florida, for their first trip to the beach. And I didn't get to go, but that was all right because I got spoiled at Mom and Pap's, Anyway, and so most of the time they would take off to go for vacation. If it was very far, I wasn't going to go because of being car sick. We did go to Geneva on the lake. I remember that in Ohio, and it wasn't very far, and I was okay. And it was one of the most fun trips because Gary now could swim and I couldn't. And I would sit on the beach and watch him swim, and make sandcastles with my mother. And Gary was probably about 4 and Alan was about 6. And they had this raft out further out into the water that you swam out to. And then when you got out there, they had diving boards and you could dive off of it. And my dad was a lifeguard when he was younger and was a good diver and a good swimmer. And he took Gary out, and Gary's 4, practically on his back, out to this dock. And Gary swam some, but then he had Daddy there to help him, and Alan swam beside him. And they got out there on the dock, and there was these men out there on the dock. Daddy was telling us when he came in that these men, when they were ready to jump in the water to help Gary. And he said, he's all right, he's all right. And of course they get out there, and Gary starts diving off the high board, and they just couldn't get over Gary being able, to dive and swim like he did. But the one fun thing we did out at Geneva was we got 2 bicycles, a bicycle for 3 and a bicycle for 2. And Daddy and Mommy rode the 2, and Gary now and I were on the bicycle for 3. And I can still see it, and I was in the middle, but I would put the pedal on and let the guy.
Very smart. So if you can think back to take a little step in a different direction, what's your earliest recollection of anything?
Of anything?
Yeah. I mean, how far back can you go? Do you remember younger than 4? Because that's probably about 4 you're talking about there.
Well, I remember when ice turned. I remember in that same house, I remember Easter morning and looking for Easter baskets. And Mother always had special Easter baskets all through.
Did she hide the Easter baskets or do something like that?
She would hide them, and we had to look for them. And this one year, they were, I think they're called peck baskets. Maybe they're not that big, but they were long rectangle baskets with a handle. And she would always have them just filled with, or the Easter Bunny would have them just filled with things. And we had to, of course, find them. And our house wasn't very big. And Gary and Alan found theirs first. And because they're named, our names were on them. And mine I couldn't find. And Gary and Alan helped us look. We looked and looked and looked. Couldn't find it. Finally, Gary found it, and it was inside the oven.
Was that your mother or your father's doing?
My mother's.
So, obviously, as we were kids, we had the little plastic eggs with candy and things in them. What did you have as when you were kids? What type of candy? Did you have like little Hershey Kisses back then? You know, like today, they're the little colored Kisses or Peeps. I mean, what was the candy?
The candy was mostly chocolate, marshmallow, and peanut butter candies.
Like individually wrapped?
Yes, and some of them weren't.
Uh-huh.
Some of them weren't, and some of them would be solid, and some of them were hollow.
Okay.
And the Easter Bunny at our house always made sure that there was a lot of different things. So you would have a chicken, and you would have a bunny rabbit sitting, and you would have a bunny rabbit standing. You would have a lamb, and you would have a cross. And, you know, every kind of thing was different,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as opposed to just putting in eggs. And then we had our own egg that was our name on it. And mine was usually a coconut one. And there was chocolate on top, and my name was written on it. I think they had to get them special made somewhere.
Did you have a favorite stuffed animal as a little kid? Do you remember having a stuffed animal?
I don't remember stuffed animals, but I had doll babies.
So tell me about your favorite doll.
My favorite doll was a Betsy Wetsy doll. And she wet her pants when you fed her, you know, water, and you could change her diaper. And that year I got Betsy Wetsy, and I got a carriage, not a stroller, but a carriage, and it was a really nice carriage, you know, to put the baby in. And I played with that baby doll, you know, and I got it for Christmas, and I played with it and played with it. And it must have been in the summer of that year, the next year, that we were outside, and I was wheeling the baby buggy, and Gary and Alan had riding cars of some kind, like a fire engine and a convertible car, and we're down the sidewalk on 4th Field Street in Fairmont, West Virginia, and there was a bridge that crossed over the hollow. And Gary said, I think we ought to see what happens if we wreck. And Alan said, you better not wreck. You know, Daddy will get mad if you tear up your car, you know. So Gary picked up my doll buggy and threw it over the bridge to see what would happen when it wrecked.
And that was the end of Betsy Wetsy.
That was the end of Betsy Wetsy because we couldn't get down to get it because it was a hollow underneath the bridge. You couldn't get down.
I bet you cried.
I cried because I could see Betsy's head off of her head. It was off of her body.
So were dolls back then, were they plastic or were they ceramic?
There was more rubber.
Okay.
More rubber.
Okay.
Yeah, a softer rubber.
Mm-hmm. Did you sleep with your dolls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Susie.
Susie was the name of your doll? Tell me about, you talked about injuring your eyes and how they fixed that. If I remember, didn't you go to Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
So,
I went to Washington, D.C. on the train with my mother. And they had a real bad heat wave that came through at that time. And went into the hospital. And Mother had told me, you know, that not to be scared. I would go to sleep, and when I would wake up, not to worry because she would be there, but that I might not be able to see very well, you know, but that she was there. She would be there. Well, as it turned out, the heat wave came, and there was no water in the hospital.
oh my gosh.
Something happened to the water in the hospital. And I remember after the surgery, I couldn't see. And I kept hollering for Mommy, but she was there. It's just I couldn't see her, you know, because my eyes were patched completely, both of them. And I got scared. And of course, they didn't want me to cry, you know. And so one of the nurses brought me a popsicle, you know, to keep me from crying because there was, you know, no water, you know. But anyway, I got this popsicle, and that stopped me from crying, you know. And I left the hospital, and Mother and I stayed in a YMCA or YWCA or whatever back then. We went to cafeteria to eat, and my mother would tell me that to think of the plate as a clock, and at 12 o'clock would be my potatoes, and at 6 o'clock would be my vegetable, my peas, or you know, whatever, and where my milk was, and so on, because I could not see at all. And Mother said people would look at Mother like, oh, I feel so sorry for you, and very pitiful, you know, she said. She remembered that, and she said, well, she's going to be okay. She's going to be okay, you know. And they took me to get my eye patches to the doctor's office to check my eyes and take the patches off. And they took the patches off, and I could see double. Everything was 2 of everything on both eyes, so I was seeing 4 of it. And so they put the patches back on, and then they put little pinholes in the patches. And they told my mother to take me to the Smithsonian and to have me strain to look at things through those peepholes, those little tiny holes. And I remember doing it and seeing the First Lady's dresses, you know, from the inauguration. And I remember seeing the Orville Wright's plane and a big piano and a dinosaur. I remember seeing all this stuff through those little pinholes.
And how old were you at the time? Like 4?
No, I was 7.
7.
I was 7, yes. And we went back to the doctor, and he said that they would have to do the surgery again, but they had to wait so long. And so they would have to do it again, but I would have to come back. And so we went home, and I don't remember exactly how long it was, but I think it was probably a year before I came back to have it redone, or they did it again. And we were going to the train station, and the traffic was just crazy. You know, people were standing on the curb and everything, and as we were walking to the train station, and somebody told my mother that the Queen of England was coming down the road with President Eisenhower. And that's why there were so many people on the road, because it was her first trip to the United States. And so Mother and I just thought, well, we'll just sit here and wait, stand here and wait. And we waited and waited and waited. And I'm sitting there on the curb, and she came by with the Ike, People are hollering Ike,
So was she the queen yet? Had she been inaugurated?
She was the queen, yes.
Okay.
It was her first trip as queen.
So that's interesting. Here we are.
Yes.
70 years later,
Yes.
and she's still the queen
And
of
she's
England.
still the queen.
Wow.
And she was so pretty, and I remember it. She was waving, and it's like she just waved at me. Like I felt like she waved at me, even though I had patches on.
You could see.
I could see, and we almost missed the train, but we didn't. But we got home. But it was quite a trip.
Did you ever get hurt any other time as a child? Did you ever break an arm or a leg or something playing sports or
Never.
anything? No?
No. I got knocked around a few times playing football with my brothers, but it did hurt bad.
So what are the earliest memories you have about your first house that you lived in?
As a child?
Yeah. Can you remember your room, or maybe the room that you kind of remember growing up in?
We lived in an apartment building on Oliver Avenue. I don't remember the number of the place, but I do remember it. And it had like a sunroom with lots of windows
This is in Fairmont?
in Fairmont. And then you will come in the sunroom, and then you would go into, and it was kind of like a sunroom living room. And we didn't have a TV back then. We didn't have TV. And then it walked into a big room, which was a bedroom. The bedroom was huge, and it had Mother and Daddy's bed, and there was a baby bed, and 2 bunk beds. A set of bunk beds, And that's where we slept. We all slept in the same room. That was my first house.
Okay.
Our first house. And then you walk from there into the kitchen, and it was a big kitchen table, everything, and then you went off of it into the bathroom. And behind us is where Aunt Marilyn and Uncle Junior Anderson lived, right behind us.
So as you were growing up, now that I'm still talking about the young ages, up through junior high, did you ever have a bedroom to yourself, or did you always have to share a room?
I had a bedroom when I was 7 in Pleasant Valley. Gary and Alan shared a bedroom, and I had my own bedroom. And it was the first time I had a double bed, because I slept in the bunk bed.
Yep.
And Gary was in the baby bed at that time, or for a long time. And you probably remember your sister when she got her white bedroom suit.
Yes.
With the
Canopy.
frilly canopy and everything. I had the same thing. Only mine was purple and white also. And I had a vanity where I put my little perfume and stuff, my hairbrush and stuff, and dresser. And it was so nice to have my own room. It was so nice.
I bet, after being in the bunk bed.
With your brothers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So, did you go to church as a child, and who'd you go with? And I think I remember there being talk about a prayer house also.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
The prayer house was at my grandmother's house. The prayer house was built by her father for her mother. And it was this little one-room house with a door and a window. And it had 2 chairs, green, and it had a green table with some flowers on it, fresh flowers in summer and spring. Otherwise, there were some artificial flowers. And right in the middle of the the table was the Bible. And there was a picture of Christ on the wall. There were curtains on the window. As a child, I think all my cousins, you would kind of think of it as a playhouse, you know. But it was not a playhouse, and grandmother definitely told you it wasn't a playhouse. Now, you were welcome to go in it at any time, but if you went in it, you did not play with cars or doll babies. You had to sit and read or study your Bible stories, you know. And she did have some books for children, for, you know, Bible stories in there. I remember that. When I was little, I went to church all the time. When I was about 3 years old, my mother and father were having some issues and some marital problems. And I went to stay with my great aunt and uncle, my Aunt Lillian and Uncle Herschel. And they were very involved with the church, the Free Methodist Church, where Grandma went and my whole family was raised in. And the preacher wanted to adopt me. My Aunt Lillian wanted to adopt me also. But Mother would not agree to that. And even though she thought maybe I would have a better life, she was not going to give up her baby girl. And now she may have one of the boys, but anyway, Aunt Lillian was older than my mother. She was more my grandmother's age. And she had a daughter, Ruth Harriet. And Ruthie was in college when I was there, high school and then on to college. And I remember when she got married, I was maybe 6 when she got married. But I wanted her husband to be my boyfriend because he could play violin. He was so good at violin, and he was so cute, you know. Lynn was his name. And he also went to the church college that Ruthie went to. But Aunt Lillian is the one that she enrolled me into the church cradle roll at the Free Methodist Church, which is a lifetime membership. And when I was 2, and there's a picture of me with my hair in little curls and a little jumper dress, skirt on, and white blouse, and bows in my hair. And she's the first person that curled my hair. Mother never curled my hair, I guess because she never had time. She was too busy with everything else. But I remember her putting rags in my hair to make the curls. They were just white rags that you tear and, you know, from a sheet or something, and you wrap them, and then when you unwrap them, you got these little curls, you know. Yes, and I just loved having curls. I loved having curls, you know. But anyway, it was a fun time too.
And what church was it that you went to?
Fairmont Free Methodist.
And is that the same church that you eventually ended up getting married in?
Yes.
Okay, is it kind of by the fire station right there?
Yeah, by the fire station, Morgantown Avenue, yes. The church was probably raised or built by my family, my grandmother, my mom, Merrifield's mother, and her family built that church as far as getting the membership into the church, you know. Yeah.
And that's the same church that Dad ended up going to as well, is that right?
Yeah, Daddy went there, and that's where we met. Mm-hmm.
What age did you meet at the church?
We were a senior in high school, I believe. A senior in high school. We could have been a junior, but I think we were seniors.
Okay. Let's see. So on Sundays after church, think I remember you talking about everyone would go for a Sunday dinner.
It seemed like Grandma's house is where everybody would show up at. And it was the meeting place, you know.
This is your mom's mom.
Yes, grandmother's house. Everybody would come to Grandma's house and for dinner. But usually you didn't know who was coming. And that lasted clear up until I got married. Because I remember living there as a high school girl and coming home from church and thinking we were going to have maybe 6 people for dinner, and we ended up with 20, you know. But Grandma always managed to put another potato in the pot and open up a can of applesauce or something so that everybody got fed. Yeah.
That's great. So when you were young with your mom, what was a typical meal like? What was the kind of food you guys ate just on a routine basis? What do you remember?
Mother was a good cook, a very good cook. And she managed to make things out of nothing, you know. And she could make a meatloaf and it would taste like it was the best meatloaf in the world, you know. And nothing wrong with meatloaf, but a lot of macaroni and cheese, a lot of fried potatoes and onions, a lot of navy beans, soup beans, ham hocks, you know, cornbread, tomato gravy.
Tomato gravy, I don't know what that means.
Tomato gravy is where you put like tomatoes, a can of tomatoes or tomato soup, and you make gravy with it.
Hello. So, did you and your mom, or you and your grandma, did you cook or bake together?
Grandma would bake with Mother and I both. And the one thing that Grandma could make was more than one thing, was pie crust, biscuits, and bread.
All homemade.
All homemade. Now, she didn't have a recipe, you know. It would be a handful of flour and a handful of Crisco and a pinch of salt and, you know. But Mother and I, when she tried to teach Mother and I how to do things, it's like dough would stick to our hands. Like if you're kneading the bread, you know, and the dough would stick to your hands as you're trying to mix it, you know. Same way with biscuits. And Grandma would say, you're doing it too much, you know, as far as biscuits, because the less you do biscuits, the better they are. But the bread, it didn't stick to her hands. Only Mother's and I. And it was weird. It was really weird, you know. But she taught us. She taught me how to you know, cook a beef roast and things like that. How to boil an egg and how to mash potatoes.
So, if she made pie crust, was there a favorite pie that she made that you liked?
Pumpkin.
The pumpkin pie was
Pumpkin
good.
pie.
She made homemade whipped cream and all that.
Oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. She had Mrs. Springer drop off milk from out in the country where they milked the cows, and the cream was on the top in a glass bottle, and she would use that cream to make whipped cream.
Oh, that sounds good. So, who were your childhood heroes? Who'd you kind of look up to?
Who did I look up to? I think probably, I looked up to probably my grandmother, Mom, because she had a hard life, you know. She married at 16, and she had 4 babies, and then her husband died. He was killed in a car wreck. And then what she had to do, you know, to raise and keep a roof over their heads. And she washed clothes and ironed clothes and cooked and made pies and bread and everything just to have money, you know. And at that time, when her husband died, my mother was only 6 months old. So she had 4 babies, really, you know. And then, of course, she met Pat. But just what she went through during that time when she was young that I heard about, you know, it made me think that she was so special, you know. And the fact that she was such a God-fearing person, you know, and such a good Christian person, you know. She didn't, I mean, if somebody needed something, she was there. You know, you need a sandwich, I'll fix you a sandwich. You know,
Yep.
She always, you know, I guess her as a young child.
So, what was your neighborhood like? I mean, was it nice? Was it more rural? I mean, tell me about kind of the neighborhood.
Well, when I was little, like right before school or first grade, clear up to first grade, it was in the city, but it wasn't a wealthy neighborhood, you know, because we weren't wealthy at all. Everyone, it seemed like there was children in every house, you know. All the kids knew everybody. The kids all played together, you know. And there was the Marquesans, they had 4, you know. And there was the Tennants, and they had 2. And there was, of course, Aunt Marilee's, and they had 3. And then so-and-so had 2. And we were always outside playing, kick the can and tag and all that, you know. And you didn't have to worry about things happening to you as a little child. You never thought about things happening, and I don't think our parents worried about that kind of thing, you know, or getting picked up by a stranger. I don't think we really worried about
The door
that.
was always unlocked?
Door was always unlocked. Yes, yes.
So, you moved quite a bit.
Yes.
So, that had to have been a little tough.
It was tough going from school to school, you know. And but I was a pretty good student, so I didn't have any trouble with that, and I was pretty well outgoing, so I didn't have trouble making friends, and I was good at jump rope and jacks and things like that, where I would have girlfriends, you know. And my brothers, I think, had more trouble than I did as we moved around, you know. And it was just because Daddy was trying to move us up, you know, from the trying to get up from we weren't poor, but or rural, but just trying to get us up and make things a little better, you know, for his kids.
Yeah. Could you tell me a story or a special memory about your brothers? Tell me a story about your brothers.
About my brothers.
Yes.
A story about my brothers. Okay. Well, I got a lot of stories about my brothers. Now, if we're talking about when I was young, you know, when, of course, I told you about how my brothers would take up for me and protect me, but they also, you know, wrecked my baby doll carriage. I think as we got a little older, I think one of the biggest stories was Alan, and I don't know if it's a story, but it's a memory that's always been with me. And it was when he was 6 years old, so I was 5, 4 and a half or 5, and he had climbed a tree down off of where the hollow was, and Gary was there and some of the other neighborhood boys, but he climbed a tree, and when he was up in the tree, he saw a snake. It was a garter snake, a green garter snake, and it scared him, and he went to put his foot back to kind of like back away, and as he did, the branch gave way, and he fell. And when he fell, he hit his head, and it knocked him unconscious. Well, I wasn't there. I was in town. I had gone to town with one of the ladies, one of the girls, older girls that babysat for us. And one of the boys in the neighborhood come looking for me, or for us in town. And when they found us, they said, "You need to get home right away because your brother's been hurt real bad. And they don't know if he's dead or not." And I remember he's dead, you know. And Jeannie, who was the neighborhood babysitter girl, she was about 15 or 16, and she grabbed my hand and we ran all the way home, and it was a good piece. We ran, and when I got home, of course nobody was there, you know, and they said that the ambulance had come and taken Alan to the hospital, and that Mother was with him, and I was supposed to go to Aunt Marilee's. And I went to Aunt Marilee's, but I was scared, you know, because I could still remember them saying they don't know if he's dead or not, you know, and I remember that. And Alan had a brain concussion and a fractured skull, and he was in the hospital for 19 days, and before he came to. And when he came to, it was like he was a baby all over again. He didn't know how to walk. He didn't know how to go to the bathroom, how to eat.
And how old was he again?
He was 6.
Okay.
And I remember Mommy telling me, you know, he had to go to the bathroom. He had to go to the bathroom, but he didn't know what to do. And Mother told him not to worry about it, just to go ahead and wet his pants. And he wet his pants, and then he cried because he wet his pants in the hospital. That's the story that, I mean, it's just something that's always been with you as a child, you know, growing up. You always remember when your brother got hurt.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So did you have any pets or a favorite pet when you were little?
When I was little, we didn't have any when I was little. It was probably not till I was about the 4th grade, maybe. We got a dog. It was a German Shepherd. It was called Rusty.
Okay.
And we had dogs after that.
Okay, so this was at Paps or?
No. We lived in Farmington at the time. The very first dog we had was Rusty. Like I said, he was a big German Shepherd, and he was an extra big German Shepherd. And he would lay under the coffee table, and when he would get up, the coffee table would get up.
Was he a nice dog?
He was a nice dog, yeah, but he got distemper, and he died. But we had 3 Rusties after that. Every time we got a dog, we named a Rusty.
Now, were they all German Shepherds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and how long did you have those dogs? Did you have them all through your childhood?
Probably more through junior high, up till around 7th grade, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was it your dog, or was it the boys' dogs, or your dad's dog, or your mom's?
I think at first it was Daddy's dog, you know, but then it became the boys' dog, you know.
Okay.
And he was the first Rusty was so big that he scared me a little bit because you know I was smaller, and and he was bigger than me. You know, even when he sat, you know, he was tall when he sat, but he was more the boy's tall than mine.
So, what did your family do for fun when you were a kid?
Daddy liked to go to Kennywood Park.
Okay, Kennywood Park is a
amusement park, like
Okay.
Kings Island or Cedar Point. And my dad loved roller coasters. And Gary and Alan did too. I was petrified. And I would not get on them. And
okay.
neither would my mother.
So
So
basically,
it
you
was
walked around
good.
the park while they did the roller coaster.
We usually sat on the bench and watched. And if it wasn't to the amusement park, it was to the pool.
Mhm.
You know. And again, I didn't swim, and my mother didn't swim, so it was basically for Gary and Alan and Daddy.
Did you ever really learn to swim?
I did, not until I was probably 8th grade, maybe
Okay.
7th grade. I was watching Gary and Alan dive at 12th Street Pool in Fairmont, and I was sitting on the edge of the pool with my feet in the water, watching them dive because they were learning new dives. And when they dove in, then they would come to the ladder and get up and go around and go back and get to the diving board, you know, and they'd have to come behind me. Well, Gary came behind me one time and he pushed me in. And the water was 12 feet deep there.
Uh-huh.
And I knew I had to do something.
Yeah.
You know, I had to do something. It scared me, but I had to do something, you know. And I realized, moving my arms, you know, I could get to the edge of the water or to the pool. And so after that, I started jumping in. And I would jump in just a little ways and turn around. Then I'd jump a little further and a little further till eventually I learned to swim.
As a 7th grader, what were the bathing suits like? Were they one-piece bathing suits or two-piece bathing suits?
I had one piece.
Were two-piece bathing suits coming into fashion yet, or?
Yes, I'm sure they were, because I remember my Aunt Jeannie in a two-piece bathing suit when I was in grade school, you know, but I didn't wear one.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was skinny.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to show,
Yeah.
so.
So you talked a little bit about sports earlier.
Mhm.
How did you get interested in sports?
Probably my mother.
Uh-huh.
Mother, it was in my mother's blood.
What were her favorite sports?
Her favorite sports were basketball, softball, and she loved to watch football. She never played football, but she knew the rules,
Mhm.
you know. And I'm sure she got it from her father. Her father was a softball player
Mm-hmm.
back in the teens, 1900s, and he played in the big league down there in Fairmont, and then the fact that Uncle Darrell, Mother's brother, played ball, and her other brother also played ball, and so the only other person to play ball with was Aunt Lois. Well, Aunt Lois was goody two-shoes and never got her fingers dirty. Where my mother was out there making mud pies, you know, and she was playing ball with boys. You know, she didn't care if her knees got dirty or her socks got dirty, you know, but she was a tomboy. She was a tomboy. And so she instilled it in me, I think. And I loved it anyway, you know. I loved watching basketball, and I loved softball. And I played softball in junior high.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what sports did you play?
I played softball. I played some basketball in junior high, intramural, and with Linda, my good girlfriend.
They didn't have girls' sports back then. like school sports, did
It
they?
was all intramural then. When my mother was in high school, they had girls teams, and that would go just like the boys teams and play other schools, but they didn't girls when I was in school. And I played basketball with Linda. Linda was a forward, and we played half court. And I was a guard, and I was tall then, and so I could steal the ball easy, and I was very aggressive with basketball, and I always got the ball to Linda, and Linda would make the basket. We still talk about that. And track, I love track too.
Yeah.
I was a good runner.
So short distances, like sprints, or long distances?
Short. Short.
So obviously, I know a little bit about you bowling when I was a kid and so forth. How'd you get into bowling, and tell me a little bit about bowling?
Well, my mother bowled. My dad never bowled, I don't think. My mother bowled. I didn't really get into it till after I was married.
Okay.
Is when I started in the league, and I think it was my girlfriend Esther Morgan and it was in an alley that only had like 6 lanes, and it was a league thing. And then later, I was in the league with my mother and Linda, and we were on the same team, and that was when we were married also. But I love bowling. And then when I came here, oh goodness, in Ohio in '77, I got in the league here because I loved it so much. And I was in it until I think in the 90s when we moved.
So as far as bowling goes, what kind of average did you have and your mom have?
My mother was about a 180. She went to state tournament, and she had a 700 series when she went to the state tournament. She won money, and that was in West Virginia. My average when I quit bowling was 164. When I quit bowling, my high game was 244. And I don't remember my high series, but it wasn't a 6. And it certainly wasn't a 7.
So did you wear bowling shirts and team shirts or anything like that back in the day?
We had, one time we had a shirt that had a Roadrunner on it. That was my team name in one of my leagues. And we wore them, but that was about the only time where we had shirts and stuff.
So you talked about your friend. Who was your best friend as a child, like up through junior high? Not after that, but in your early years. Who was your best friend?
Probably Punky.
Okay.
And it was because he was my age. We were the same age. And he was, when we were little, he was always, would play with me because everybody, I was the only girl. And you had all these boys, 5 boys and me, and he would play with me and play with my dolls and play my dishes and, and I'm talking from the time we were like 2 and 3 and, up in that age. And we were good friends even when they moved away, we continued to stay friends, and we went to prom together. We dated together in high school. But
You mean you'd go on double dates and stuff?
Yeah. But as a child, I would say he was probably my closest, best, other than my brothers,
So as a young girl, did you participate in Girl Scouts or any groups like that or anything like that?
I was in Brownies, and I was in Girl Scouts also. I didn't care for Girl Scouts. I liked brownies,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't care for Girl Scouts, and I don't know why. It could have had something to do with the teacher, you know, the leader of the Girl Scouts, but I just didn't care for it.
What kinds of chores did you have as a kid? Did you get an allowance or anything like that?
I remember the first allowance we got was 10 cents a week.
Okay.
Gary Allen and I. And then I remember when it was a quarter.
Like at what age are we talking?
Grade school, I remember the quarter in grade school. Of course, your report cards, we got, 10 cents for grades, if you got A's and that sort of thing.
Do you remember what 10 cents or a quarter could get you?
Oh,
Like, was that an ice cream cone? Was that a candy bar? Or was that something bigger than that?
I remember Daddy giving Alan 50 cents. And when we went up to see Mama, and in the afternoon, after dinner, Daddy would take us to the movie theater, and he gave Alan 50 cents because he was the oldest. And he said, here, this will get all three of you into the movie and get you some popcorn and a drink. And that was for each one of us. And he said, you be sure to bring me back the change. Now, how much?
what a great, didn't you also, if I remember, have like a chore, like you had to clean the drums or the cymbals or?
I cleaned the cymbals, yeah. I cleaned the cymbals, and I did that when I was in elementary school.
Okay.
I like that. I like that job because I could see how shiny they you put that pink stuff, Brasso and stuff on it, and then, and then make sure you didn't put your fingerprints on it, afterwards and everything. Yeah, Daddy had me do that.
Did you ever sit down and play with the drums, or did Gary or Alan ever play with the drums or damage a drum or?
They never damaged one. Daddy would let them sit and play, and he gave them lessons. He sent them to a music teacher to have lessons. But when they went to the music teacher, they would have a drum, but then when they got home, they had this little pad with drumsticks that they had to do. And Daddy, his drums usually were in the car, and then of course you didn't get to the drums if Daddy wasn't there. I mean, you wouldn't even, if they were set up in the living room, you wouldn't dare touch the drum unless Daddy was there.
Do you remember what color they were?
I remember black ones. I remember white ones. Like a gray color. Yeah. He had many sets.
Now, I remember back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, a lot of people would paint the drum head on the bass drum.
Yeah.
And they'd have the name of a band or the band leader.
Or Gus.
So what did his name, Gus?
Gus.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Gus on it. And his first drum set he got for graduation from high school. His very first drum set. And it was bought for him by his grandmother, Sarah Ella Ice. Bought him his first set of drums.
Did you ever, obviously I know you played clarinet and then also played cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever try playing the drums yourself?
No.
No interest or?
I never did. I think I kind of thought it was a boy's job to play the drums. But I knew better as I got older because Daddy taught Aunt Jeannie. And Aunt Jeannie was a really good drummer too when she was young. He taught her. She was the first girl to make the band corps line in Wheeling when she was a freshman in high school. The first girl to ever make it. And she was taught by Grandpa Gus.
What year would that have been roughly? Do you know?
Oh,
Let's see, when was she born?
Gibson would have been 40s. She was born 26.
So that probably would have been right around 1940 if she'd have been 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
So right before, or right
Yeah.
when the war kind of started.
Around 41 or somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. What kind of books did you like to read as a kid?
As a kid, as a little kid,
Yeah, up through junior high.
first was probably anything having to do with fairy princess. You know, Cinderella, that kind of thing, Snow White, and those kind of books when I was little. I didn't like cowboy books of any kind. I didn't like car books. I didn't like anything science fiction, scary.
You like
anything.
comic books? Or-
I don't like comic books. They
what about-
seem scary.
Did you have like Nancy Drew? Was that something when you were a child, or was that afterwards more when Val and I were children?
I don't remember it as a child.
Okay. What music did you like to listen to? Once again, this probably would be more as a 11 to 14-year-old in that age bracket before you got to high school.
Well, of course, in junior high is when rock and roll started. But Grandpa Gus wouldn't allow rock and roll on the radio in the house because he didn't like it, you know. But the music I grew up on was big band and jazz music, you know, and I like that kind of music. I still do. But when I became in junior high and Elvis and the Big Bopper and all that stuff started coming out. I mean, and learning to dance like that,
Mm-hmm.
Although my dad used to jitterbug with me like they did in the 40s, so I was kind of already into the rock and roll kind of dancing, with the jitterbug. But I wanted to be like the other kids, and then them were listening to big band.
Did you have a crush on any celebrity, maybe a movie star or a music star, someone where you just thought, that boy or that man is so cute? Who was the first teen kind of crush?
I don't know that I really had a teen crush on anybody. I mean, I liked Elvis as far as that's concerned, but I liked more groups of like the Temptations and the Bladders and those kind of, as opposed to a single person.
Uh-huh. Let's see. So when you were young, did you ever collect anything? Because obviously I know you collect snow babies and Department 56 houses today.
Mm-hmm.
Did you collect anything when you were a little girl at all?
No, not really. Not really. I had a thing when I was wee little of rocks. When I was little, and I wanted really smooth rocks that didn't have any, and I would collect them, and put them on the sidewalk in front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to be real smooth. They couldn't be any jagged like gravel or anything like that. They had to be real smooth.
Now I know you said you went to several elementary schools
Mm-hmm.
and moved around there. What elementary schools or junior high school did you go to? Do you remember the names?
The elementary schools was Fairmont. It was a white school, Pleasant Valley School, Farmington School, and Berryville School. And those were all Marion County. And there was only one junior high I went to, and that was Fairmont Junior High. It was the only one.
And did the kids from that school all go to West Fairmont, or did they split from there? Did kids go to different high schools from your junior high?
No, they all went to West Fairmont.
Okay. How did you get to school as a kid? Did you walk to school, ride your bike to school? Did you take a bus? How'd you get to school up through junior high?
I walked in elementary school, as I got a little further up, sometimes we would get a ride from Mother or Daddy if if it was raining or something like that. We didn't ride a bus, no school bus. Other than when I was a senior in high school, I did ride a bus from east side to west side to go to school.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say your fondest memories of elementary or junior high school are?
My fondest memories of junior high or elementary? Well, junior high, I would say, was making the friends that I made in junior high. Because that's when I became involved with band. And most of the kids in band stayed in band clear up into high school. But most of those relationships carried on in high school too, just as a relationship as a friend, not just a band member, but a friend, and to this day are still friends, you know. In elementary school, I think I had my first boyfriend when I was in elementary school in 6th grade. His name was Harry. I don't remember his last name. Harry was his first name, and he was shorter than me too. But he was cute. And I think I was in 6th grade then, 5th grade or 6th grade. And I remember I won the prize for the best Valentine box decorated that year. And I remember getting a Valentine from him, and he had hearts he'd written, or made hearts on his Valentine, you know, and it said, "Love, Harry."
How did you decorate Valentine's boxes back then?
Well,
Was it a shoebox?
This particular one was more like a boot box, and it was square. And my grandmother had helped me and showed me how to do it. And I cut circles of red tissue paper. And then I had so many, and I can't remember how many there were. And then I had a piece of more of a cardboard box that was thin but a little heavy. And I would put it on the tissue, and then I'd wrap the tissue around it, the very first one. And then the next ones would go the opposite way until I had several. You know, I don't remember if it was 8, 12, or how many there were. And then I took a straight pin and put it through the center of it, and then through the box. But I had a heart, big heart, and so I made all those little roses that outlined the heart. And I had wrapped the box in white paper, so it was red and white. But it got voted by the classmates that it was the best one.
What a great story. Well, obviously your niece Lindsay, or your granddaughter Lindsay, my niece, is an elementary school teacher today.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a favorite elementary school or junior high teacher? One that sticks out that you remember, or anything like that? And if so, what do you remember?
I think I remember the favorite one would probably be my 7th grade English teacher. She was also my homeroom teacher. And it wasn't just 7th grade, it went once you had her, or you got 7th grade, you had her homeroom teacher for 8th grade and 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it was Mrs. Rice, and she was real tiny, very tiny, skinny, and she had reddish hair. She wore it like this.
How was that again?
Like this. But she was so sweet. I don't think I ever heard her lift her voice, to anybody. And English, I loved English. especially grammar with diagrams of sentences and that sort of thing. And she explained everything so well. And I don't know, she was just a favorite.
Yeah. Well, just one last question on your childhood. If you had to describe it and say, just as a whole, just a quick overview as far as, would you say it was a happy childhood? Was it a difficult childhood? How would you categorize it?
I'd say through those years, it was ups and downs. And most of the ups and downs were with my mother and father and their relationship. And of course that affected the children during those years. When it was a happy time, it was a very happy time. When it was sad or difficult, it was a very difficult time. At times that you wish you could run away. And yet you loved your family and your mother and your father, and you would get mad at them and wish things were different and so on. But all in all, I would say, yeah, I know a lot of people that had a whole lot worse than I did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for kind of walking through the childhood a little bit. And I'm looking forward to our next one that we do on high school. So.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So, and likewise, I can't wait to do that and kind of go through some of these things also. It's going to be a lot of fun. So,
yeah.
anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it, Mom.
You're welcome.
Love you.
Love you too.